I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Um, this is a second part of the Defender data training. We're going to focus more on South Carolina specific application of Defender data. And then the second part of this training, we will have a talking about using Defender data as a case management tool. Our presenters today are Carley Spivey out of the Second Circuit. She's everything but the circuit defender over there, from my understanding. Carley's going to walk through a number of the scenarios that we have created for general sessions and regular criminal, adult criminal situations. Also, we have Kelley Brown from the Second Circuit. I think I said Carley was from the Second. She's from the Third Circuit. Kelley is from she's the juvenile attorney over in the Second Circuit. She's going to focus on the applications of Defender data for in juvenile cases because there are some entries that are very specific with regards to juvenile cases. And then after they have gone through their scenarios, we will then have Derek Bush to go through the case management usage of Defender data. So with that being said, we're going to turn it over to Carley and Kelley and allow them to do their thing.
I am Carley, and like you said, I'm with the Third Circuit. We oversee Sumter, Lee, Clarendon, and Williamsburg counties. Eddie Donald is our circuit public defender. He allows me to do a lot in Defender data so that it can work best for our circuit. Okay, so I oversee, we take care of the Third Circuit, Clarendon, Lee, Williamsburg, and Sumter. Defender data is really good software. We use it a lot. It is only as good as the data that we put into it. Our circuit, it is the go-to. If something happened in a case, we immediately put it into Defender data, which means that our initial entry process may look a little bit different than yours. But what I did just want to say up front is just to keep in mind during this training that while you guys may utilize a field differently than we do, we all need to enter at least the required data the same way so that the commission has quality data to utilize at the state level. Also for reference, this is not, like Hervery said, this is not basic training. So at this point, you should know how to navigate within the software. And I'm going to be going very fast. He's given me a lot of scenarios and lots to cover. So let's go ahead and get started. The intro slide told you guys exactly what we were going to be covering. I don't think I need to read it, but I'll just go back. Opening adult general sessions files, new charges and case grouping, how to handle backlog attorney assignments, conflict attorney assignments, the difference between case and charge dispositions, the different charge disposition options, and then the brand new cases that we are all going to be seeing soon, the SOR cases. In opening a new file, we need to gather the application, obviously, the charge information. Hopefully your circuit gets a warrant. That's the easiest way to enter it. Sometimes we don't get that in our smaller counties, so we have to depend on the public index. Obviously, we need to determine if it's a new client or an existing client. We need to complete the case tab, the charge tab, and the client information section. I will not be going over any of the other tabs in Defender data, the event tab, tickler, notes, all of that. If we were to go through all of that, which is extremely customizable by circuit, we would be here for 3 hours probably just talking about that. Our first scenario today that we're going to talk about is opening a new case. So in order to open a new case, we have to go to our home screen and we're going to see if they're an existing client or a new client. We would simply search the name. Our first client today is going to be Roger Rabbit. So I'm searching, I'm looking to see if I'm going to get a match. I'm hoping that I do, because obviously it's going to be faster to open the file. But another thing that we do here sometimes is we will enter the date of birth information, because sometimes that'll catch aliases. We didn't have a new file, so I'm opening that as a, I'm sorry, we didn't have an existing file, so we're opening that as a brand new client. As you'll notice on this first tab, the case tab, the fields that are in green are things that have not saved yet. So first thing we're going to do, this is an adult file. I'm going to open it in Sumter County. It's being assigned today. In our circuit, we screen applications. So this may look a little bit different for everybody else, but we go ahead and change it over to attorney unassigned, and I make the status screening. The reason for that is because when you save a file as open, it automatically counts that case in Columbia, and we want to avoid, if we're doing screening and it's a rejection, we want to avoid that being logged, if you want to call it that, in Columbia. This is a general sessions file, and Roger Rabbit's arrest date was August 1st of 22. So these are the required fields for this tab in order to save. If any of that was not completed, it would not save. It would give you an error message. Once it saves, it's going to auto-generate a file number based upon that particular county. It's going to give you your county code, your year, and the number of files that have been opened so far for that county. For purposes of training, I'm going to go ahead and assign this to an attorney. Eddie's getting a new case. Roger Rabbit sounds interesting. I'm going to first mark it, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to first mark it as approved so that it logs that information, since we do our own screening here. So far behind, it's going slow today. And then I'm going to log it as open so that that case is reported by Columbia. Once you finish your case information here, you can go to your charge tab. These are the two main tabs we're going to talk about. Obviously, there are no charges here, so we're going to use add on the top taskbar. So our first charge here is grand larceny. If you do the data entry portion, you have probably already figured out that using the CDR code makes you go much faster. I'm going to input the ticket number. If this was a duplicate ticket number, I would get a red checkbox here. Something else that we use big time in our circuit is the law enforcement case number. We screen our own applications, so we are appointed by public defender. My defender data is dragging. This individual applied when he was on bond, so I'm going to complete bond. Case was appointed today, so I'm going to fill out that. If I had the incident date or the warrant, I would fill that information in there. We added file date as a custom field in our circuit. Since our clerk took over managing the docket, that's how they pull their records. So in order to try to mirror them a little bit better and know what should be coming up on the next docket, we've added that so we can track it. We also, again, because we screen and we accept applications, we have this at fee paid checkbox. That allows me to pull reports the weeks of plea court or court to send to our clerk to make sure that fees that have been temporarily suspended are assessed on the back end. Discovery received and offer received, I think those are custom fields for us as well. Mr. Roger Rabbit did receive a bond. He has a surety bond. $10,000. It was set same day he was arrested, and he was released on the same day. So this is all of the major information that we put in when we open a charge. Once we save that information, we can go back and go do the client information through the edit button here. Obviously, we know his name. We need to enter statistical data like his birthday, gender, ethnicity. If we had any of this other information about his marriage minors, any of this information over on the right-hand side, if it was a previous client, it could be helpful to the attorney once they get new charges. A lot of the times we don't have all of that information on our application, but it can come in helpful. So if we have it, we always make sure that we enter it. All right, we're going to put in his phone number, social, all statistical data that Columbia would like us to enter if we have it. One thing I do like about Defender data, oh, I can't spell today, is that if you put in a zip code, it automatically fills in the city, which is really nice. It's just one small thing that it helps us to go a little bit faster. Okay, so that's most of our client information here. If we had a photo in our circuit, we do add a photo. It helps the attorneys at times when they're in a room full of people. So that is our client information. So we've opened our file. He only has one charge. Notice here that it still says adult. Now, if I go out of the file and come back in, it's going to update that information. Sometimes for some reason, refresh doesn't always do that. Why my system is so slow today? So notice that it did update the charge information here. Okay, so moving on. That's the basic of the basic in opening a file. The main thing that I would need to get across to everybody today is client, case, and charge grouping. So it can get very confusing when you think about where does this arrest go? How do we organize this? So if you consider the client as a tree, the case is the branch, and a charge is a leaf on that branch, it kind of helps. The main piece of data to pay attention to for grouping is the court level and the arrest date. New charges in a different court or just new unrelated charges at the same court level are going to be considered a new case or a branch within the client tree. All charges associated with the new case is a leaf on that branch. So let's go ahead and look in Defender data and look at a scenario. So let's say Roger Rabbit was rearrested. He got rearrested on December 1st for new unrelated charges. So first of all, we don't know off the rip that Roger Rabbit is an existing client, especially with one charge. He's probably not on the radar very much. So let's go ahead and we're going to click on new case on our home screen, same thing we did the first time, and we're going to search for him. Now this time we're going to end up with a match because he is in our system. Notice here we have three options. So it's a 40% match. If I had put in birthday or social security number, I probably would have got a higher percentage. There's three options here. So we've got the file cabinet, which is click to create a new case with a new file number. We have the briefcase, click to create a new case with the file number. I think it probably should say the same file number. And then there's the click to create a new case for a new client with the search info. So if I had searched, if the client that we had here under the file 43A2337 had been Roger Dean Rabbit, and I'm trying to open a case for Roger Jack Rabbit, then I would use the plus symbol here to create a brand new client, an entire tree. But since we know this is our client that we're looking for, and it's an unrelated charge, I'm going to use the briefcase because I want to create a file for him within the same file number, but it needs to be a new branch or a new case. All right, so within the case, we still have to create all of the same information that we did before. So it's an adult file, Sumter County. I'm going to general sessions. I think I'll say that 15 more times. His arrest was December 1st. And remember, because we screen, I have to go ahead and update this information first. This may not be a step that you guys have to do. I'm going to go ahead and put it as approved. All right, so we have the case information filled out. The next thing that we need to do, just like when we open the file from the get-go, is we need to put in the charges. All right, so I'm going to add from the top screen here. Roger Rabbit's new charge was a murder. Okay, so the difference with this case in comparison to the other case is, yes, it was still appointed by us. But this time, his bond was denied. So he's being appointed as a jail case. Oh, today's the 6th, y'all. Again, if I had the incident date or the file date, he did not pay his app fee, so I'm not going to check that box because it was temporarily suspended since he was in jail. And again, I said his bond was denied. Okay. Oh, look at me. No, that's right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to save this information. So he now has he has one client. He has 2 separate cases. Yes, they're both in general sessions, but both of them have different arrest dates. The next scenario we're going to talk about is if Roger Rabbit gets served with new warrants while he's in jail on a related case and how those charges are added. Unlike a new case that's unrelated that we need to add from the main screen or from the case tab, if it's a related charge, I can just select the case that it's related to, which will be August, and I can just add from the top taskbar here within charges. So now he has received a new related case. It's a B&E auto. And this one is related, and one of the ways I may have been able to tell is because it has the same law enforcement case number. Now, the only new field in this section of the charge tab that I need to complete, because this was a subsequent related arrest, is this charge right up here where it says subsequent arrest. I'm going to, he was not served until December 19th, so I'm going to fill that in. Again, my computer's being slow. I'm going to skip some of these fields, but it would be appointed by public defender, appointed as jail. I would not click off my at fee paid button, and then his bond was denied. There's one other field on this screen that's really important that I want to point out to everybody. The appointed date field on your charge tab is where your reports will pull from. So if you're trying to pull a report that is all new cases appointed within a set date range, and you are only filling in the appointed date on your case tab, it will not return results. So if I ran reports in August, clearly Roger Rabbit would show up on that report. If I ran reports in December, his other charge would show up. But if I left this blank and then I ran reports December 20th, he would not show up. So make sure that you complete this appointed date field if you're using the reports in that way. All right, so that's everything for opening a case, adding a charge, adding a new unrelated charge, and adding a related charge that the warrant was served later. Go. Let's talk about case closure versus charge disposition. So cases and charges have separate closure fields. Charges on the charge tab can close prior to the entire case closing. Charges have disposition sections that are specific to the ticket or warrant, and the case tab should only be closed if all charges are disposed. Let's go back and talk about Roger Rabbit again. He pled. So let's look at case disposition for Roger Rabbit. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to close everything. This is just kind of a procedural thing we do in our office. We don't close anything on the case tab here in the status of open until we are absolutely certain that all of the charges have hit the public record. I'm certain that our circuit is not the only one where somebody could have pled and something else was dismissed, and our sheets are green. They may be different colors in other places, but somehow the no pros green sheet hasn't made it to the clerk yet. So we don't close anything here just to make sure that everything makes it to the clerk's office and to the official record, and that we know we need to follow up on something we can. All right, so he pled to the grand larceny. We're gonna, what is his charge that he pled to? His disposition charge. Sometimes if they plead to a lesser included, you would change it to the correct CDR code there. Dispositions, if you do this on a daily basis, you know that they have, oh, I did it backwards. There are shortcut keys to get you through. PGY is pled guilty. Disposition date, he pled on the 1st, so we want to make sure that's accurate. He did receive 9 months at SCDC. SCDC. Again, same sentence date. Now, let's talk about this sentence note field. Notes are good, except we have to remember that that is not trackable data. So he actually, he actually was sentenced to 9 months. He got 2 months time served. And it was concurrent, and he did credit for time served. So just remember that this sentence note here, while it's much faster for us to just type in CTS, 2 months, 9 months, SCDC, or something of that nature, this data in the top right, which hasn't always been here, is actually to the auto at the same time. There's a delay. It's going to catch up in a minute. So the last thing that I have noticed here in my scenario that I was given is the murder charge was dismissed. Lucky rabbit. So I'm still going to put in my disposition charge. And then when I'm putting in the null pros in the system, it's DNP is the shortcut. And the only thing to put in here is just going to be the date that it was filed with the clerk. So we're going to save that. We've handled every charge within this case. We've handled every charge within the secondary case. So I'm going to go to the case tab, And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close both of those. Remember, each case has its own closure. In addition to the charge tab. All right, so Roger Rabbit has officially been closed. Oh, well, Defender Data helps you out sometimes. All right, so we talked about case closures versus charge disposition. Let's go ahead and also talk about charge disposition, non-conflict charge dispositions. So technically, there are lots and lots and lots of dispositions. There's any number that we could go through, but we're just going to stick to non-conflict. So charge disposition sections should be completed in full. Again, extra notes are not trackable data. When a private attorney is hired, each charge needs to have the correct disposition selection. Each individual charge and the case tab needs to be closed. So the options that we have available in Defender Data that the Commission track are under the non-conflict are PD relieved other and PD relieved retained private counsel. Again, just remember to always close the case tab after you've made your selection there. I do not have a scenario for that for time purposes. Let's next talk about SCCID conflict attorney appointments, oftentimes called 608 attorneys. So conflict cases are entered and opened, again, exactly the same as a standard case. However, once a conflict is identified, these cases are immediately closed. The disposition information varies slightly based on when it was identified. If the PD worked on a case for any length of time prior to realizing it was a conflict, you would choose PD relieved conflict after representation. Otherwise, it would be the standard RCC, which is PD relieved conflict. All right, so let's assume that Trix Rabbit is a case and we just realized that she has a conflict. In addition to all of those standard disposition, we've already been through all that. The charge section, make sure that that's marked as RCC or relieved after representation if we've already done it. There's also a button here that's linked. So once we realize that we represented Mr. Roger Rabbit, Trix was an accessory after the fact. I think she was the getaway driver. Oh, hold on. So we want to choose the murder. Once I add that, that is officially linked to her case. Anytime I open Trix Rabbit's file, I'm going to immediately know based on this one right here that there is another case that is related to that. It also goes backwards and forwards. So if I'm in Roger's case and I'll see that same number one, and it'll bring me over to Trix's file. All right, let's next talk about backlog attorney assignments. So I do not have an example for this, again, just for time reasons. I'm trying to get through a lot of information here, but it's very straightforward. Again, they're opened and entered exactly the same way as a standard case. Whether this case is being transferred after it's been represented for some time, or whether it's a brand new incoming appointment or application, it's going to be, again, entered and opened the same way. The assigned backlog attorney should be listed in your attorney dropdown for tracking purposes. And the file status that we use is open and active. Now we do that so that we can easily differentiate between our open cases for the cases that we represent within our four walls versus the open and active cases being represented by backlog attorneys outside our four walls. I'm not sure how the other circuits are doing that, but it has been very beneficial for us at times when we need to separate out that data. Columbia would like us all, and it is imperative that we always assign the backlog contract flag to these cases. That can be found on the case info screen. That is how they are tracking them. It's a quick way for them to do that. And again, them having that data helps us at the state level. I know we would all like raises, and they work hard to try to get us that. So disposition section is not completed until the close of the case. So again, it's completed exactly the same way. We're getting credit for these cases, if you want to call it that, in the open and closed statuses through Columbia. All right, the last thing that I have on my list is the SOR cases, the new sex offender registry cases. These cases are open with the case type of SOR instead of adult or juvenile. Currently, they're only opened in our system when a direct SLED application is denied, making it an appeal case from the General Sessions Court. I had questions about this because we haven't had one yet, and in discussing it with Hervery, I learned that we would open the case in Defender Data using the original charges that the person was put on the registry for. However, the disposition section would still be left blank. These cases, for our purposes, have their own section within the disposition dropdown under sex offender registry motion. And then obviously whatever the outcome or the finding of the court was, once that hearing is held, would be the disposition that we would select there. That is everything that I have. I know I went really, really fast. I know people don't want to sit around for a long training. I'm always available to answer any questions if anybody has any questions or wants to follow up with me on how we use Defender Data. But that is how we handle file opening and closing in the Third Circuit. So Hervery, I guess I could send it, or Kelley, I guess I'll send it over to you.
Okay, so you should be seeing my Defender Data screen. Is that correct?
Yep.
Hold that down there so where it doesn't bug me. Okay. So juvenile cases are going to be a little bit different, and I appreciate Steve Hampton going ahead and loading up my fictional Snap R Krispies and giving me scenarios so I didn't have to make my daughters juvenile delinquents and creating scenarios with them. So our juvenile client Snap. So right now I'm on the case information screen, and you'll see some things do look a little bit different. So case type here is juvenile, and court is going to be juvenile or family court. And over here, instead of arrest date, we have petition, because in juvenile court we don't have warrants and we don't have indictments. Our charging document would be the petition. Now, sometimes you get a case and you may not have a petition date yet. That's kind of rare. We don't generally open a file until we have a petition in hand, but on the occasions that we do, we may create a date there and then go back and fix it later. Hopefully that's not messing with anyone's data too much. But I'm going to go over here to the client information tab just to show, basic information has already been input for our little 13-year-old Snap. We've got address, we've got a social security number, date of birth. The age pops up, which is really helpful with juvenile cases because you can track as they're approaching that magic age of 18. Clearly, Snap has a little ways to go. So we have as much information here already filled out as we need to. We would, obviously, we would add, phone number here. And as that's green, now we know that that's got to be saved. And if I try to do something without saving it, the system's going to let me know. Now, because I am on my Surface Pro today, my screen may not have as much information spread out as you would see, as I would see on my desktop. So if I scroll down, I see there's a special juvenile information tab, and that is fairly new for all of you juvenile defenders. You may not have noticed this yet, but we've got some things to track here. So if we knew that this kid was a special ed student, might have a 504 accommodations plan, might have an IEP at school. So we're just going to say that he's got, a 504 plan. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And then with the client location, we now have this drop down menu comes up, or pop up as the case may be. So this client, we have already filled in the system all these different possibilities. And this client was released to parent. So this client location is currently at home. And then we have another tab down here in case we have a dually involved kid. So dually involved youth would be, defined as any kid who is involved with more than one agency. If it's a juvenile client, by definition, they're involved with DJJ. So if they're also involved with DDSN, DMH, or the Department of Social Services, that's where you would put that in. So let's say because he's got a 504 plan, probably we'll say he's involved with the Department of Mental Health. Now, as you know, if I try to go to the next thing without saving, it's going to pop up and tell me. All right, so here we are now at the case information screen, and there's some information down here in this juvenile information box that's also a little bit new for you juvenile defenders out there. And obviously the type of evaluation, community, secure, or in a short-term alternative program, that would come into play, after, the kid's adjudicated. And then we also have here in the truancy box, if this kid had been charged with truancy, we've got the options to go ahead and track this as a petition for school attendance order or for a rule to show cause. And then again, waiver type here, that's not pertinent at this point. So we see on our charges screen, and this is all information that I have because my paralegal will have already opened this case and filled all of this out. So I'm going to see that, there's a shoplifting charge here, and there's an assault and battery. Steve made that an abhand. I'm just going to go ahead and correct that to, let's just say that's a third degree that went along with that shoplifting. And that's something that you can always do is if, someone input information, that wasn't correct, or sometimes, particularly in juvenile cases, you might get something, and there's an indication that it's going to be one charge. When the petition comes in, it's actually something else. And we can just simply go ahead and change that. We're going to put our petition number in here. And I'm showing you that you would put the petition in there, but I'm going to go ahead and remove that just in case I already have one of those in the system. But that's, information that's on here is you go ahead and you can have your incident date, just like in the general sessions cases, the collateral consequences, thing here, if that applies. And those may be things that Derek goes over more. And then we said that he was released to a parent. Now, we're going to assume that he's arrested on new unrelated charges for murder. So, and I can actually do this just from right here while I'm looking at it. And I can go ahead and, since I know it's him, and I can go ahead and click the briefcase to give us that new case. And so And as you see, it won't let me do it without putting in a petition date here. So I'm just going to say it was 01. I'm just going to say it was yesterday. And then we're going to save that. And now in this case, and see, we still have that same information on him. And where was my other? In some of these fields, I am still learning, and let's see. Well, oh, client location, right there. Looked right past it. So he was detained. So he's here at the juvenile detention. Someone saying something? Okay. So he's at the juvenile detention center. And because he has been detained on a new murder charge. So now we're going to go to our charges. And we're going to add murder. And this is where I would add the petition number and the date. And because the solicitor in our scenario here is going to attempt to waive him up to General Sessions Court, I'm going to come over here and say waiver type, he's in waiver evaluation status. Now, let's assume that we've been working on this case for a little while. And let me just pause and ask, are there any questions at this point about any of the juvenile specific fields that we've looked at? Okay, so let's assume that Mr. Crispy's, while this waiver process is going on, he wants to go ahead and deal with the shoplifting charge. And we are going to go ahead and go to court. He's going to plead to the shoplifting, and the assault and battery charge is going to be dismissed. So when you're coming in with your dispositions, he is, the disposition is that he's pled guilty. We're just going to say that was today, and got probation. Well, actually, because he's detained, we're just going to say he got, let's just say he got time served. So we're going to say he got a definite commitment, and he's going to get 30 days. And then this charge is being dismissed. The disposition here is going to be the dismissed because he pled to other charges. And here's the date. And I'm going to save all of that. Now, because he still has this charge pending, I'm not going to send my paralegal an alert to close out the case because he still has charges pending. So we're going to assume that he's gone through the waiver process, and we got really fortunate, and let's say he ends up pleading to a lesser charge. So we're going to let's say, he ends up doing a plea to assault and battery first degree. It's probably going, that's going to be a plea. And then that's probably going to be an indefinite commitment. Now, I'm not going to fill out any of these because the indefinite commitment is going to be the final sentence on that. Now, other possibility that could have happened is, I'll clear all these out. Let's assume that we had a waiver hearing. And so once we had that evaluation in, I'm going to go to my case tab. And I'm going to say that we had a waiver hearing. And now go back to the charge screen. And let's say that the kid gets waived up to General Sessions Court. So I'm going to do it in my disposition here. The disposition charge is murder. And at this point, the disposition is going to be waived to General Sessions Court. And now all of this is going to be closed out. And then a new adult file would be opened up to start all over again with that case. Hopefully that doesn't happen and we don't have to deal with that. Now, one thing real quick I did want to also add on here is, let's say that when he came in with these two charges, the shoplifting and the assault, let's say that there was also at the same time a petition for a school attendance order. And I'm doing this primarily for you juvenile defenders to show you some of these new truancy fields and dispositions that are here. And there we go. So the family court truancy, and I would do all this. So let's say that the kid goes to court, and this was just added this week. So the disposition charge is going to be, let's say this was that petition for a school attendance order. We now have on our drop-down menu truancy options. So we can track if it's a school attendance order for both parent and student, just the parent, or just the student. And that can now be on the disposition screen with the date. Obviously, it's not going to be a sentence, but that is new. And then likewise on the case information screen, expedition date. So that was a school attendance order. Okay. Now, last thing that I want to look at is, let's assume back when he pled guilty to the shoplifting, this was a different scenario. He's not sitting in detention and he ended up having an evaluation done. So he pled, and now the judge ordered an evaluation. So I'm going to go back to my case screen, and I'm going to choose whether it's an evaluation in the community, a secure evaluation, or he's doing a community evaluation, but at a short-term alternative placement. Let's say he's doing a secure evaluation, and then I'm going to save that.
Thank you for your presentation earlier today. Hervery and Steve, thanks for setting this up and inviting all of us to share. I am going to share my screen here in a second. We're going to talk about how do we use Defender data as a case management software device. So you guys should be able to see right now my screen. And I wanted to let y'all know, if you have questions about how to utilize Defender data as case management, please do one of two things. Either A, enter it into the chat. I know Steve told everybody that. Or B, I'm going to probably have a couple seconds after I'm done presenting for y'all to ask questions. Or C, you can call me, and I'll give you all my contact information, but happy to share that with you guys. So just starting out, we're going to do a quick overview. Y'all can see my screen. If you use Defender data regularly, you can kind of see who your recent clients were, the cases that you've recently been in. On that main screen, your home screen is your schedule. So we utilize in our office in the Second Circuit the schedule for a lot of things, but you can actually, if I were to open it up, you can kind of get a look at what was my week like this week. So we were out of the office on for the holiday Monday, and then we had appointments, mental health court. We had appointments here with prosecutors to go over caseloads. We had appearances today. My boss was gracious to let me leave that early to be here. And here you can see I've got the training. We've got when court is, so that we can remind ourselves which judges will be in chambers for each court term, bondsmen off bonds. I have House of Delegates meetings, things of that nature, and then back to appointments. So we track it just like private law firms do. We use this software like private law firms do. Frankly, this software is nicer than what private law firms have. And so it's a fabulous way to keep track of it. You can keep track of your schedule on your desktop. You can keep track of it on your iPad, and you can also keep track of it on your phone, which is great. To the far right, you can see alerts. Those alerts are for cases that essentially, let's say for this one in particular, my client called wanting an update. It went to my voicemail. Those are things I know I need to pay attention to. And then tasks down here, woohoo, I've cleared my tasks, but if I had tasks of things to do for the day, you would see that here at the bottom associated with cases. The last thing on the home screen I want to point out is reports, and I'm going to go in there just briefly. In here, we've got a ton, we've got a fabulous ability, frankly, to create reports that allow us to track our cases. Obviously, as Carley mentioned, the SCCID in Columbia, they do some of that stuff, and it helps them as they prepare to give budget presentations to the legislature to get us all raises. So really keeping track of your data is super important, and it's important for them, and it's important for all of us. But also, it's important for you as an attorney to be able to look through and see what's going on in your cases. One of my favorite reports that we have is solicitor defendant report. So here we have every solicitor in our circuit listed. Let's say Brandy is a solicitor. I can click her name, my name, and cases that are open and active. I can run a report. It may pop up on the other side of my screen. It did. But pulling it over here, this is what the report looks like, and it essentially prints out all the names of the people, their charges, when they were arrested, and gives us an idea of how many people that the solicitor and I have in common. So here you can see that she and I have 30 cases with each other. So it's a great way for when you're going to meet with prosecutors, for you to have your own list. I know for us, our prosecutors use PCMS, and those lists can be kind of messy, and they're just really succinct reports. But you can run reports here for all kinds of things. Cases that have been closed, you can run them for case reports by specific defendants. That'll tell you how many defendants you have as an attorney. You can run case flag reports, and we're going to talk about case flags here in a second. So if you get a second in Defender data, go and fool around with that. I think you'll really actually enjoy that. So to hop into case management, we're going to use Roger Rabbit again. Thank you, Steve, for creating that here. And I'm going to go over kind of how I, as an attorney, use it. I think Carley did a fabulous job of how administrative assistants use Defender data. So I'm not going to go into charges and all that stuff. I'm going to talk more about scheduling. So I use scheduling for lots of different things. First, in our circuit, we're a clerk-run docket. And so we have first and second appearances. Let's say that appearance was today. For first appearance, I'll always know where that is because it's in my schedule, and their name will auto-populate out on our schedule. So if you pop into schedule, even though 8 a.m. was a little bit early, as you open up the schedule, you can actually see Roger Rabbit now as an 8 a.m. first appearance. So anytime you put in that first appearance, it auto-populates into the calendar, and I can always tell who has appearances for me on the days that we do because they auto-populate from the schedule in the case file. I also find it to be really important to keep track of appointments. So let's say this Mr. Rabbit's out on bond and he's coming in to meet with me today at we'll say 2 p.m. Well, I can have that there. It'll show up in my calendar just like I showed you the first appearance does. And let's say, well, I should show you. You can add notes to these these schedule entries. Why is that important? Well, I can say I met with Roger Rabbit on January 6th, 2023. I can track all of my notes from that meeting. So, maybe Roger Rabbit says, I'm not guilty and I didn't do this. That's great. Maybe he says, talk to Rice Krispie and talk to, I don't know, Reese Puff, and let them tell you what happened, right? So I've got these notes about what to do. I've met with them. Let's say I met with Roger for a couple minutes. Well, not only is it going to always be here in my schedule when I look at these appointments or I'm trying to figure out how did it go in the last appointment, but it also appears in the notes section. So it'll tell you here, this was the appointment from the calendar. That was the date. That was the time of the appointment. And then over here, when you save that input, it'll actually tell you what time it ended. So I do that for appointments. I can kind of keep track of how long I'm meeting with folks. But also what's important for me amidst this drop down is jail visits. So if Roger Rabbit is in jail, I can go down here. I can put in jail visit. And let's say I started meeting with Roger Rabbit at 1:28 p.m., right? And if I started meeting with Roger at 1:28 p.m., we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, whatever it was we talked about. And then I got up and left. I save it at the end of that jail visit. And again, if you flash back over to the notes section, you can see what time the appointment started and what time the appointment ended. I think that's really important. And normally when I do this presentation at Public Defense 101, I ask people, have you heard of what ODC is? And, everybody kind of raises their hand, sure. And most of them haven't had the experience of receiving one of those nasty grams from the Office of Disciplinary Conduct. But the way that I do it, oftentimes when those come in, it's typically, oh, my lawyer hasn't seen me enough. Well, when that happens, I can actually go back into my schedule, and in my response to those complaints, I can actually say, well, I saw this person on this many times since I began representation. And during each of these visits, I've met with them for a total of however many hours, however many minutes, whatever. And these are all the things that we've discussed. So it's a really helpful tool to kind of track how long you're meeting with your clients. And it's a great way to save when you're meeting with your clients and sort of what type of meeting you're doing. I'm actually going to show y'all a real case of mine here in a moment so you can get a better grasp of what the schedule actually looks like. But other things that you can add in here that we find really important here is bond hearings. So if you've got a bond hearing and it's scheduled for us, the clerks schedule those. So I can put in the bond hearing and say what date and time, and I'll know that. It'll show up on my calendar. There's a bench warrant hearing for them. I can put that in there, date and time. I'll know about that. We also put in when we request discovery, and you can see discovery motion filed, requested discovery, and when the first round of discovery comes in, so we can track dates that those things happen. If there's evaluations, if any of your clients are potentially incompetent or not criminally responsible, you can put in the date and time of their evaluation and then notes when those reports from the evaluators come back. We've already sort of talked about appearances. You can put in jury trials for municipal and magistrate court. You can do the same for motions, like motions to suppress, or if there's a Schmerber hearing, things like that. You can put those dates in there. And then down here, you can put in when you request a preliminary hearing. I love preliminary hearings, ask anybody in my office, but we put when you request those here, and then when the hearing is scheduled, you can track all of that. So why is that important? Well, it's important because when your case is over, as we all know, let's say it's a murder case and you've gone to trial and you filed an appeal. Well, you owe appellate defense a whole bunch of information about your case, dates of hearings, dates of bond motions, dates of preliminary hearings, and all of that is saved in the file. It's super easy to access and makes the response to appellate defense really easy. So I would encourage you guys, use the scheduling function. It's a super helpful way for you guys to track what's going on in all of your cases, but also, I look at cases a lot of times and taking notes in cases, particularly defender data. This is somewhat morbid, but if something were to happen to me, I would want whoever were to get my cases to be as up to date as humanly possible with what's going on. I want them to know when the last time I met with people was, what those meetings were about, and all of my notes are all in the same place. They're all here in the notes function. I should say, and give a shout out to our boss here, Grant Gibbons. We are a totally paperless office. So truly everything that we do for all of our cases is housed and lives in defender data. And our circuits really embrace that. I think it's really been a blessing to us and has really helped us to be more efficient in our office. Plus, we don't lug huge files all over the place. Another great function of defender data here is the people section. So this is a great way for you to be able to save family members. Say that your client has given you expressed consent to discuss their case with. So let's say Ralph Rabbit, I actually don't know if that's Roger Rabbit's dad, but let's say Ralph Rabbit is the dad, and you would click add. You can come over here. The role is family member, a comment, put dad, don't worry about I put their telephone numbers and stuff like that. But then once you save them into the file, you can add notes like client gave me expressed consent to talk with dad. Great. So now forever, I've got the date that my client gave me that express consent to talk with his dad, and I can save notes anytime I have conversations with Ralph Rabbit. Plus, anytime I type in these notes here for what's going on with Ralph Rabbit, if you come over here into the notes section, the notes section will tell you that this note, client gave me express consent to his dad, belongs to the family member Ralph Rabbit, just like it does in the people. The people tab, you can also add, it's helpful if you have co-defendants. So you would do that. You would add involved here. It's the exact same process. And that's a way for you to be able to keep track of who is involved in certain cases, and it helps with potential conflicts getting caught early on when you actively do that. In the documents section, this is also equally important. Defender data offers a couple of really cool things. In our circuit, the administrative assistants do a lot of the taking discovery and putting discovery into the file for us. But for example, here, let's say I've got this competency to stand trial evaluation that came in. I can actually just drag and into the larceny file, I can drop it and it'll add itself to the file. So here it is. There's the competency to stand trial that I just dragged and dropped in there. And at any point I can click view and give it a second, but it'll pop itself back up. It's going to be over here, but it pops itself back up and populates into the PDF that I just entered. So that's a great way to be able to just quickly add documents to your file. You'll see in the real life file that I show you here in a second all the different folders that we had for that particular file. And you can just drag and drop things to their appropriate folder. The other really cool thing that we do is you can track all of your emails with the prosecutor. Let's say you've got prosecutors that you maybe just respond to via email, or you've got an offer and that offer came in via email. You can always drag and drop those. So, here's the example. You would just drag it over here to the same larceny folder, drop it down. You can see it's adding, give it 1 second. But once you've added that email to defender data, it lives here forever. And at any point in time during representation, me or anybody else, if somebody else ultimately gets the file, let's say the case somehow gets conflicted after representation, but there's an offer, they can go back, click view, and that specific email with the offer in it will pop up. So here it is, blah, 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 your client is guilty from the prosecutor, right? But it's just that easy. So it's a fabulous way for us to be able to save communication. It's easy to just drag and drop. It's not something that you have to type in or put in. All you have to do is drag and drop if you've got your application open while you're reviewing email. And like I said, that's not just for you, but it's for the next man up if that were to be something that were to occur. So why sort of is this important? Well, it's important so that you can keep all of your communications in one place. Our office also has phone systems, thanks again, Grant, that allow us to get voicemails to email. And I won't show you how to do that, but if you have that opportunity or that option, you can also do the same thing. So you can keep all of your voicemails from your client, if that's a thing for you, in the same place. So really, really cool functions here in the documents. And I think it's important for us to kind of pay attention to that. Lastly, in this sort of scenario on Roger Rabbit, before we go look at what it looks like in a real file, is case flags. So here you can see the case flags are in the far right corner. I think I told you when we reviewed the report section that you can run reports based on the case flags that are in cases. Here it says that my client's in jail, he's at the Aiken County Detention Center, and that we need discovery. Well, I can then go into reports. I won't do it because of all my other cases, but I can run a report on every case I need discovery. And let's say I'm in court and I've got a little bit of downtime. I can run that report and shoot emails out to prosecutors asking for discovery in those cases. And it's easy. You just go up here, you click the flags portion, and it might take a second to load up. But all of the case flags that are available for all of our cases are available here. You can see if it's a drug case, you can click drug case. You can say that they're in jail, out of county. If they're in jail somewhere out of the county, let's say they're in Sumter, right? I could have that they're in jail there. If it's a mental health case, I can mark it, and that way I can run a docket of all of my mental health cases to make sure I've gotten mental health records and am moving along properly in their evaluations. If you need a drug report and it's a drug case, you can have that. And then once, let's say it's a drug case and you've got that case flag out there, or just for ease purposes, let's say we needed discovery, but now we have received discovery. Well, I can just as easily just hop in there, click that needed discovery, click save, and then when the case refreshes itself, that need discovery flag will be gone. If I click the refresh button, yep. So you can see that the need discovery flag has been removed. And then when I do a report to try to find cases that need discovery, those are gone. So what does this look like in real life, right? What does it look like in a regular file? I'm going to go to a closed murder case of mine. This case was resolved a while back ago in 2020. But if you were to look at the schedule, you can come in here and now, when this case inevitably comes up for PCR, you can see all of the appointments that I had, all of the jail visits that I did, and then really what's helpful in those types of hearing is I have notes from each and every jail visit. I have notes, from this jail visit 3 days before a bond hearing. I've got notes from an additional bond hearing. I have notes from preliminary hearing, and all of those things are saved in a really succinct way. So I don't have to go into my notes section here and go searching through like, oh gosh, when was the bond hearing, or oh gosh, when was the preliminary hearing? When you've got tons and tons and tons of notes about meeting with someone, it's all right here. It's all succinct in your schedule, which is really helpful. Like I said, it's not only just helpful for you as the lawyer, while you're managing the case, if people are questioning whether or not you're going to see your client enough or you're spending enough time with your client, all that stuff is tracked here appropriately. But it's also helpful when the Office of Appellate Defense is asking for specific dates of preliminary hearings and bond hearings and things that were on the record, dates of pleas, all of that. Then if you go into the document section, you can see, I know it's a little bit slow, but you can actually see all the different types of folders that we have, and it's easy to create it. You can see the appeal, the discovery, there were some evaluations, PCR, the records from the hospital that we did, some certificates of service and some things. All of that stuff saved in here. There's no paper aspect to it. I don't have some big file with all of this stuff in it. Everything's actually saved into the file, which is super helpful for purposes of let's say I have a PCR hearing. I can actually just open up my iPad and review all of this stuff with whoever's asking me questions about it. So there's a lot of really important things, I think. Back to the people section, I meant to touch on this. The cool thing, again, about the people section, if you were to look at it. So I was allowed to talk with this particular client's father and grandmother. And, here it tracks, not only was I going to see my client in the jail, you can see that in the schedule, but here it tracks all of my conversations with the grandmother and all that we talked about when I talked with those people. The same is true when you click here for the dad. It might pop up. Yeah, the dad wasn't anywhere near as involved as the grandmother, but that's just some examples in real life about why and how you can utilize these tools as a case management software. I think it's fabulous that we have the ability to keep all of these things in one place and for every attorney. And so I would encourage you guys to utilize these functions, to utilize the Defender Data software. I mean, the commission has done just a fabulous job of affording this for all of the lawyers who work for the public defender's offices across the state. And it's just a fabulous way to be able to keep track of your cases and to manage your caseload. It also helps the commission, particularly when, I think as Carley pointed out, when you come in to your charges section, once you have finished your cases, for you to properly close them out. So if Roger Rabbit had pled guilty, let's say he pled guilty to the grand larceny, it's taken a second to load, but here in the disposition, you can choose really in anything that they've got going on. Let's say it could have been remanded, not necessarily that grand larceny, all the different ways things can be dismissed. If they went into a diversionary program, they were in drug court, or pled guilty or pled under offer. Let's say Roger just pled under offer, but here the sentence could be, whatever the sentence was for your client. Hopefully, it was probation. So let's say it was 2 years suspended to 18 months probation with credit for 30 days time served. And then you can come, if that's the sentence, you can come up here, you can put 2 years is the sentence time. The probation was 18 months. And then for the time served, we can put the 30 days. Let's say it was concurrent to the burglary, second degree nonviolent, and they got credit for time served. So all this information, once saved, is, again, they're just utilized by the commission to keep track of how we're doing with cases and what's going on. So pay attention to those things as the lawyer. In our circuit, the lawyers are responsible for putting this information in after a case is completed. But at this point, that sort of concludes all of the relevant information that I know Hervery and Steve are hoping that I would cover. But I did want to open it up if anybody had any questions before I stop sharing my screen. If anybody had any questions about how to utilize Defender Data as a case management software.
I don't see anyone with any questions in the chat room, and no one have popped on to ask a question. I have received a couple of messages regarding some of the options that are available, that may be available in your circuit or in your county on Defender Data that may have been covered by either of the three presentations. Some of that information is circuit specific that was created years ago. We are in a process of trying to make sure that across the board, all of the pertinent information is uniform for all circuits. So if you saw something that you would like to see on your Defender Data that you did not, that you do not see, just drop myself or Steve an email, and we will look into it, because if it is a circuit specific situation that another circuit created, that may or may not be available in your circuit, but we will definitely explore getting it for you. But there's some of the stuff, such as the juvenile stuff, that should be definitely available in all circuits, and if you don't have it, we will look into that.